battling the relentlessly negative doom and gloom news media. It's the Nick Stenger Show, coming to you live from the Stenger Family Office headquarters. It's your host, Nick Stenger.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Nick Stenger Show. My name's Nick Stenger. We are Stenger Family Office. For the past 44 years, it's been the Stenger family's mission to deliver you both clarity and confidence to help secure your financial future. Here we are back in the saddle. We skipped an episode last week, but we are back. Let not your heart be troubled. Episode 203. What could make me bearish? Yes, there is one thing that could make me bearish. You know, I'm a bullish person, but there is one thing. We'll talk about it in 1 minute. And last chance to register for Investor Day. We are basically almost sold out. We got a couple seats remaining to get us up to max capacity, and we're just a few weeks out here from Investor Day. And coming up right around the corner, October 16th and 17th in Oak Brook at Gibson Steakhouse. The 17th is the big day where we go through our due diligence process and investments and tell you what we're doing for the upcoming year and our outlook for 2026. By the way, we just added another event in Houston. So if you're in Houston, you can't make it to Investor Day, come out to Mastro's Steakhouse. We're going to be doing just a mini version of Investor Day where myself and Sam Hardy, Audrey Feldposh from our team, and Chris Jordan, our head of tax, we're going to do just a quick run through of the portfolio changes live at Mastro's, and that is October 28th, just a few weeks after Investor Day. So if you can't come up for Investor Day on the 16th and 17th, you're in the Houston area, come out to Mastro's. That is October 28th. In the Woodlands. So don't miss it. We'll send out an invite again next week. We sent out one this week already. If you see it register, it's going to get full right away. Well, let's jump into it. What could make me bearish? I want to talk about the things that make me bullish first, and then we'll get into why I could be bearish eventually. And it's really this long-term structural bull market. I won't recap every single little piece of it today. Again, we've done this on the show multiple times, but the big idea is that we've got millennials, we've got baby boomers, we've got the growth of the emerging markets, explosion of middle-class wealth all across the world that is driving the structural bull market. Not to mention, there's a variety of other factors that make me a long-term bull. One of those is the fact that we are going to have this thing called the Great Wealth Transfer. It's all this money that's going to get passed from one generation to the next, from the baby boomers to the millennials eventually, but not even just that transfer of wealth. It's also the war generation, which is one before the baby boomers, that are actually passing money to baby boomers. We get calls consistently from clients saying, I inherited 400 grand from mom and dad. I inherited 600-700 grand. So this is part of the Great Wealth Transfer as well. It's trillions of dollars that will exchange hands, and it will go to the millennials. And eventually the millennials are going to go out and spend that money. They're going to buy houses. They are going to buy cars. There was a narrative at one point that baby boomers would have nobody to sell their houses to because nobody was going to have any money to buy them. And that is literally the exact opposite of what's happened. And that's why the bears are consistently wrong. They see the world through a different lens. They see the lens through a world of scarcity, not through a world of abundance. We see the world through a lens of abundance, which means things are going to be better in the future than they are today. And if you don't believe that, just look at history. If you're alive today, and let's say you're middle class in the United States right now, you are living better than the top 1% lived in the 1800s. That is just a fact. You have a better standard of living. And so we should just be immensely grateful. We should be immensely just amazed at the medical technology we have, at the technology we have at companies, at everything that's going on, the advancements that we're making. It's absolutely incredible. Now, it's not to say we're not going to do all these things without some problems, some bumps and bruises along the way, some hiccups, some transition periods. Certainly the big question now is AI. Yes, it's going to reduce costs for companies, for example, but how does that eventually affect workers? There's going to be this transition. So on the AI front, I don't want to diminish the fact that people are going to lose their jobs. In fact, we were on the cutting edge writing about this last year. We were a little bit early, but we wrote an article last summer called Layoffs Are Coming. And if you read that article, if you watched the show at the time, we said there's probably going to be a pullback in hiring. We had this massive spike during COVID where employees were in the driver's seat and could switch jobs easily, and that is changing rapidly. Now, some people are going to blame a few things. I think there's probably three factors going on with layoffs, with hiring right now, and one of them is AI, of course. Companies are on pause. They're thinking, what kind of talent do we need? Now, companies are going to hire. They're going to have to hire if they want to maintain growth. That's the only way you really grow long term is to build headcount. Companies that are shrinking headcount, it's not a good sign. It means they're trying to stabilize their earnings, and that's not a positive sign. So companies that are doing well are actually increasing headcount. But why are companies on pause right now? One of the reasons is because they just don't know what kind of people they need to hire. They want to hire data science. They want to hire people that understand how to use AI. They want to hire people who can implement technology, people who understand how to use it, creative type of people. And that's exactly what's going to happen. They're just on pause thinking, do we really need another 20 or 30 researchers when we have the power of AI? So that's what's happening. There's this shift going on in the economy that's radically, actually, I should say, it's not radically different than what's happened in any other technological revolution in U.S. history. We've gone to the steam engine, for example. We've gone through the first, the second, and the third industrial revolutions. Jobs that people used to do 100 years ago don't exist, but that doesn't mean there's not more jobs. In fact, there's more jobs than ever. There's more people in the world than ever. The global GDP has never been higher. Standards of living have never been higher. And think about all the technology that's happened the past 200 years. This time is not different. I've told you that on the show. Don't buy into this lie that AI is different than any other technological innovation or wave that's ever happened. It's just like all these other waves. There's going to be different, more, and better jobs on the other side of this than we went into it with. But that doesn't mean people aren't going to hurt in the meantime. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be a transition. So what I've told people is just be careful about what kind of skills you're getting. If you're a parent, you got a kid going to college, be careful what you guide your child to. Make sure they're coming out with hard skills. Make sure they're coming out with soft skills, that they understand interpersonal, they understand relationships, and that will serve them well no matter what they study. If they study science, engineering, technology, math, whatever, there will be jobs waiting for the best and brightest kids who can communicate. I see kids all the time. I think they're considered Gen Z, who you literally can't have a conversation with. They don't even look you in the eye. That's a problem. So what are you trying to develop as a parent right now? If you have a child going through this process, just develop those soft skills. That's going to serve them very, very well in whatever they choose. Now, in the back end of AI, when this is all done, said and done, and rolled out, where do I think it's going to lead? I think it's going to lead actually to this rotation back towards hard skills, meaning the trades. We have been completely underdeveloped with trades. We don't have enough electricians in this country. We don't have enough carpenters. We don't have enough people who can work with their hands. And that's where this is eventually headed. We've neglected those types of jobs. And I blame a lot of the colleges for this. I blame a lot of high school counselors who said everybody should go to college. That's an absolute joke. Not everybody should go to college. In fact, most of these colleges are churning out professional useless people. Half of their degrees, the kids don't get hired within a few years of graduation or aren't making any more than if they hadn't gone to college in the first place. So I think at some point the politicians should hold the college's feet to the fire and say, wait a second, you took all of this subsidized money, you took all this government money, all these loans. What are you actually producing? And if you don't have, let's say, a 90% graduation rate after 4 years, guess what? Your government funding's pulled. Somebody needs to hold these people accountable and get these kids into skill sets that are actually going to work. So we need to be pushing more and more kids towards business skills, trades, working with their hands. There are so many data centers now that are being built with the AI revolution. We don't even have enough electricians to do these jobs, skilled labor to do these jobs. That's what we should have more and more of. So that's what we are going to see. We're going to see this rotation, in my opinion, from a lot of these useless jobs that really should have been displaced years ago, or even useless degrees that need to be weeded out. And they need to go towards actual skills. We joke from time to time at Stenger Family Office because we see interns, we see kids in college. I talk to groups of kids at colleges, at finance classes and entrepreneurship clubs and all the rest of it. And I tell them all the time, I say, if you're going to take a job at a company, you've got to actually know a few things. One being just know how to use Excel. I can't tell you how many people don't know how to use Excel. There are so many basic things. And so that's our internal joke, as we call it Stenger Fifth Year. We'd like to bring these kids in and teach them just how to operate in a workplace. For people that can do that, there are so many opportunities coming. It may be jobs you didn't even think of. It may be jobs that you didn't go to school for. But if you can do those basic things, you're going to be okay. Now, what else makes me bullish about the market and the economy long term? This is one major factor. It's the fact that we have turned from a pension system in the United States, a defined benefit program where you'd have a pension at the end of your career, to a defined contribution program, meaning most people now are not on pensions. Most people are on 401k plans, 403b, 457 plans. And what does that mean? That means that you and I are responsible for our retirement, not a corporate pension department, corporate benefits department. And that is a very, very positive thing if done correctly. Why? Because it makes people more engaged in the stock market than ever. Just naturally what happens is every single payroll, let's say you get paid every month, or you get paid every week, or every 2 weeks, like most people, you are every single week buying stocks. You are putting money into the market. And if you're not doing that, you should be doing that. So every single paid period in the country, more money is going into the equity market than it ever before in history. More than the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even the early 2000s. More money now is going into the stock market than ever before. So why is it that stock prices keep going up? And why is it that earnings keep going up? Why is it that people are so engaged with capitalism now than ever before? It's because they know that their money is being invested according to the principles of capitalism. So why is it that we've maintained this balance in the United States between the left and the right? Why is it that we've had this stability? I know it doesn't feel stable all the time. It feels like we have these radical changes from time to time, but it's just not true. The United States is actually one of the most stable places in the world for politics. Why is that? I believe it's because people have real buy-in when it comes to their investments, to their 401k plans. And if you know that increasing the corporate tax rate, for example, is not going to be good for companies, and you think to yourself, well, wait a second, I don't own a bunch of companies in my 401k plan at work, I better not vote for higher corporate taxes. That's why we're at one of the lowest corporate tax rates we've ever had in the United States, and that's part of the reason earnings are reaching record brand new all-time highs. So now let's talk about the downside of this. Let's talk about the other side and what's so dangerous about the big Fed. Remember, we have one of the biggest Feds who has printed more money than ever before, even more than the 70s going into the 80s with Paul Volcker. And why is it that there's such a divide between the top 1% now and the bottom 1%? It's because of assets. And I've told you this on the show, you've got to have assets. If you want to keep pace with what's going on with all the money printing at the Fed, remember, most of the money printing has gone to basically fund all of the wars. Remember, the banks have been behind all the major wars, in fact, funding both sides of the same war in many cases. This is just fact. You could go back to the Rothschild era, you can go to the Rockefellers, you can go to all these famous banking dynasties, and they are behind this push to have war after war after war, endless wars, endless conflicts. Why? Because that's how they increase their net interest. They have more deposits on their balance sheet printed by the Fed, and that improves their net interest margin. That's how banks make money. So who created the Fed in the first place? It was banks. Now, I did a presentation for the city of Naperville for a group of about 200 folks and talked about a little bit of this, of why inflation is at record all-time highs. Why is it the bottom 1% are suffering so much with inflation today? It's because of the Fed printing money. Now, I had one person at the end of the presentation who stopped me and came up and said, you know what, I like the Fed. I have no assets, and I like government assistance. I like these government safety nets, and I think the Fed's a good thing. And I wanted to say, I didn't say it to her, but I wanted to say that's the exact opposite of what you should want. If you have no assets, if you're feeling left behind the past 4 or 5 years, and you're feeling displaced from what's happened with the run-up in housing prices, the run-up in stock prices, and all the rest of it, all of assets are up. If you're feeling left behind from that, you should not be thanking the Fed for that. You should be blaming them. You should be blaming a big government, because the big government is why we're in this mess in the first place. And it's like 1984, George Orwell, which I've said on the show multiple times, was not a MAGA Republican. He was kind of a Democrat, a left-leaning guy, but he recognized one simple fact, which was the bigger and bigger government gets, it stomps out everybody. It doesn't matter if you're on the left, the right, the center. It doesn't matter if you're blue, red, purple. It doesn't matter. If you have a big overreaching government, it is not good. And that's exactly what happened. That's why people are feeling displaced. That's why when you go to the grocery store now, and I go to Jewel Osco here in Naperville, those 2 bags of groceries I used to get pre-COVID that were $100 are now $200. You're thinking, how in the world are we going to keep up with this? How is this sustainable? Well, the saving grace has been assets. It's been equities. It's been ownership and things that are going to keep pace with inflation. That's why companies have been able to maintain their profit margins through record high money printing and inflation. So all of that to say that's not the main reason I would ever get bearish, because that's just a fact of life. As long as we have a Fed printing money, we have to be in assets. It's all going to work out in the end. But here's one thing that could change my outlook and change my tune. If something fundamentally changed with the way that the U.S. operates and we were to become a completely socialist society, a completely communist, Marxist society, that would change my outlook. How could that happen? Well, some people like to say we're one election away from communism. That's not quite accurate. That's not exactly how it works. In fact, the founders knew this. That's why they set up these checks and balances. That's why we have midterms and we have these 4-year cycles. Some countries, you have presidents every 8 years. We have every 4 years. We have midterms every 2. That has created a lot of stability. So no, I don't think we're one election away from communism, but I understand what they're saying. They're basically saying, really, we're one generation away from socialism. We're one generation away from communism, and that is an absolute fact, because my grandmother escaped the Nazis in World War II. She was a Hungarian. She came over from Hungary. She made it to Ellis Island in New York City to find a better life. And she instilled in me, you cannot have communism. You cannot have socialism. If you've ever met somebody from Venezuela, if you've ever met somebody from Cuba, and you bring up socialism, they literally will have a panic attack. They want nothing to do with any of that nonsense. Why? Because they saw what happened. So what we have to preserve, what we have to protect is the next generation. We have to make sure that they are not going to go down this socialist communist bent. And I'm seeing early optimistic signs that they're not going down that road. I know that sounds completely backwards, but if you look at Gen Zers today, if you look at the newest generation coming up, they are actually rejecting these policies, these policies of big government. Why? Because they saw what happened during COVID. Now, say what you will about COVID. It was a real disease. It was a real thing. We lost tons of people to it. It was sad. It was a tough thing. Okay, but all that being said, they saw the government response to COVID, which was more and more big government. It was to shut down the world. It was to shut down the economy, to go to centralized control. And they are adamantly rejecting it. They want nothing to do with big government. They saw it happen to their high school graduation, for example. They saw it happen to their college admissions. They saw what happened when they saw a big government. So they have this taste of communism, this taste of socialism, just like the Venezuelans, just like the Cubans, just like a lot of places in Europe during World War II, and they're rejecting it. So this is why I'm still bullish. I look at this newest generation, and it makes me optimistic. I mean, I'm excited to see what they're doing, what they're pursuing, and where they're headed. So that is why I am not bearish yet, but that is the one thing that could turn me bearish. Why? Because when you go down that road, when you go down this road of communism, socialism, Marxism, I don't care where you fall on the political spectrum, you just can't go down that road, because what ultimately happens is it stifles the individual. And when you stifle the individual, you stifle creativity. And when you stifle creativity, you get less entrepreneurship. And it's the entrepreneur who's created the wealth we have today. Now, there are people on our YouTube channel, when I say something like this, they are going to have a complete meltdown. They are going to go off the rails. They're going to comment. So I'm talking to a few people who consistently come back and like to leave a little nasty comment on the YouTube videos. And I'm going to just tell you right now, that's fine. Comment all you want. But at the same time, you cannot deny the fact that entrepreneurs, true entrepreneurship, true capitalism, not crony capitalism, has led to the best results of anywhere on earth. You cannot ever point to communism and say, oh, yeah, that worked. I saw a debate between two people debating capitalism and communism. And one of the things that was brought up was, well, we have better versions of communism today. We just haven't really given it a good try. And it's like, that's what we've heard every time in history. Oh, we didn't really give it a good try. We didn't really do a real version of communism. Okay, well, let's try it again and see how it works. You know how it's going to work? Millions of people are going to die. Millions of people are going to be in abject poverty. On the opposite side of things, capitalism has led to millions, billions of people even being lifted out of poverty. You can see it with your own two eyes. You can look across the world and you can say things are better because of entrepreneurs. Now, when capitalism turns into crony capitalism, that's not good. That's big government. That's just more communism. That's socialism. But what we want is we want entrepreneurs to have more and more freedom. Now, I'm going to just mention one thing about Charlie Kirk, and I'm not going to make a political statement. I know it's a highly polarizing topic for some people. I don't want to get into the politics of it. But what I wanted to say is this. I watched the memorial service. I watched what's going on. I'm watching the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's legacy. And one thing I will say that you cannot deny is there is a revival going on in this country. That is another thing that makes me optimistic. And if you go back to 2 Chronicles 7:14, this is straight out of the Old Testament. Verse 14 says, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves, pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. And what an amazing scene at the memorial service where you have politicians from the United States sitting there and praising and worshiping. Chris Tomlin sang a song called Holy Forever, excellent song, and the lyrics are that Jesus' name is higher than any other name, any powers, any principalities, any rulers. So that's what makes me optimistic, is seeing this country turn back to God, seeing people turn back, whether you're on the left, the right, whatever side of the aisle is. The politics are not really important at the end of the day. It's this. So I'm an optimist. I'm not turning bearish. That is the one thing that could turn me bearish is what we talked about, but I'm an optimist on the long run of the United States, the long run of this country, and you ought to be too. Thank you for being here. Episode 203. We're going to be back next week for 204, and don't forget to register for Investor Day coming up. If you can't make it up into Chicago for Investor Day, come to Mastro's on October 28th. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time.